Hey guys, welcome back. So today's video is going to be about the book series that I just finished reading, A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. If you haven't heard of these books, they are very popular in like the fantasy romance kind of area, which is not a genre that I typically read. I'm usually reading books more like this one. I really like mystery reads, but I have now read all 5 of the books, and I just finished this one, number 5, 2 days ago. The next book is supposed to come out in October, I think at like the end of October, so right around Halloween. So I thought it would be kind of cool to do a book review on the other 5 books in case anybody out there is interested and wondering if it's a good read or not. So I'm gonna kind of do a short summary, I think, in the beginning of the books, where I'll try not to give away like any spoilers, and then after that I'll kind of get more in depth for people who don't really care so much about the spoilers, or for people who have already read the books. So let's get started with the short summary. So I actually read the first book like 2 years ago, and I was like on the fence about it. It took me a long time to get through it because I felt like it was very slow moving in the beginning, but it definitely gets better near the end and more eventful, if you will, towards the end of the book. I will say the first one is definitely my least favorite out of all of them. The second book was my favorite out of all of them. So what I have written down for this part is just that they are super easy reads. They're very fast-paced books. Like, they're like the exact opposite of like Lord of the Rings. So Lord of the Rings, you could miss like an entire paragraph and all the characters would still be like doing the same exact thing, because like there's so much history and detail and information in every ounce of those books. Like, yeah, I feel like you can skim over and you'll still know exactly what's happening. But with these kind of books, if you even miss a sentence, you'll miss like so much information. I feel like they are very fast, but they're very easy to read. So good and bad about that. I definitely thought certain parts could have used more detail, and I definitely wanted more conversations with certain people, and there's just things that I wanted more of. So definitely not like a bad thing. Like, I think the longest book was the last one, and it's almost 800 pages. It's 750, so they are already pretty long reads, so I get why there's not more added detail in there. A lot of people would consider these kind of books to be like spicy, and even though they do have that in there, I feel like there's a lot more to the storyline and plot than just that, because like it's not like those little tiny like trash romance novels that you get at the store. It's not like those where the whole plot line is just about that. It just includes that in with the story, so it's really not as big of a part of it as you would think, especially when like you get into like the more intense part of the story. So it's not like that's all it is. So that definitely helped me a lot, because I'm not huge on that kind of stuff, but I also don't mind it. So there is like quite a decent amount of world building in this book. Like there's a lot of background information on like the history of everything, and like the farther you get into the books, the more obviously that you're learning about the other courts and everything. Especially in the third book, you meet a lot of the other High Lords, and just like seeing all the politics, and that was interesting. I actually ended up liking that part of the story more than I thought I was going to. And I also wrote down that I kind of feel like these books were like the perfect mixture of The Hunger Games and Twilight, but set in a fantasy world. So if you're a fan of either of those books or both of those books like I am, these are definitely a good book to try. So I think it was the first book, I was reading like probably the first 3 or 4 chapters, and it literally feels like you're reading from the first book of the Hunger Games, because she also, this is probably at the point where you're gonna want to click off if you don't want spoilers, because I'm gonna start spoiling things. So now is that chance to leave. So in the first book, the first couple of chapters, it literally feels like you're reading from Katniss, because she has to go out into the woods to hunt for her family, who are so poor that they can't afford food, and they're like, her and her sisters are all sharing this big bed, and it just reminded me so much of The Hunger Games, which was not a bad thing. That's one of my all-time favorite books. I was totally fine with that. And then as the storyline progresses, especially in the 5th book, it starts to feel a lot more like Twilight to me. There were some parts in the storyline too that I felt like were repetitive. So obviously in the 1st book, she is with Tamlin, who I know we all love, and her whole love story between her and Rysand, I just felt like it was very similar to what happened with Nesta and Cassian, even though obviously they were a lot different in the beginning of their relationships. I just feel like it was really, really similar in the way that it happened for each relationship. So like, they kind of started off as friends, and then the girl kind of finds out that she's their mate, and then she's upset and doesn't talk to him for a few days, and then like they accept the mating. I don't know, it felt way too similar to Feyre and Rysand's story when I was reading about Nesta and Cassian. I just wish she would have slightly like done that a little differently maybe. Other than that though, pretty much I just loved the whole storyline. I loved all of it. There was only one more like thing I could think that like I didn't like about the last book actually. I'm a huge fan of Elaine, and I kind of feel like I'm the only one who cares about her, because she's the only one who we haven't like been in her mind yet. Her and Asriel, I think. I don't remember if Asriel had a chapter in, because this book you're reading from like everybody's perspective, which was pretty cool. I don't think Asriel had a chapter, and Elaine definitely didn't. We've never been in her mind, but I think that's because they've had, you know, this whole thing going on with Lucien and Elaine about how he's her mate, and she has absolutely no interest in having anything to do with him. That storyline almost kind of felt pointless to me, but I think she might be using it as a way to show that like you don't have to end up with your mate. So I'm kind of excited to see if either of the next books are going to include something happening between Elaine and Asriel, because I have been waiting for that. She's my character. Like, that's who I would be if I was in the books, because like she's just very meek and quiet and soft-spoken, and I just relate to her a lot. I did relate a lot to Feyre as well, but I do not relate really at all to Nesta. I had a harder time reading from her perspective as opposed to Feyre. But I did still like that book a lot. It was definitely cool to watch her like storyline. It was cool to like watch her grow and learn and change. I really liked reading about her training and stuff in the books, especially because like I love to work out. So I really liked that aspect of the book. But I definitely did not like the beginning parts of the book when Nesta's just like mean to everybody, and she says horrible things to Cassian and her sister, who she never apologizes to, by the way. So that made me upset too. If I happen to miss that, let me know, but there was never any apology to Elaine for what Nesta said to her, and that kind of pissed me off. So those were the things that bothered me. The second book is definitely hands down the best one in my opinion, because this is the one where she falls in love with Rysand, and that relationship for me is very reminiscent of my relationship with my husband, just because of like how just their closeness and their bond. It just feels even more intense than Nesta and Cassian, because they can read each other's mind. One thing I wanted to mention too about the first book was that things did start to get really good once she is under the mountain trying to save Tamlin. The only part that didn't make sense to me in that, and maybe this might make more sense when I go back and reread it, I definitely need to reread that one, but the ending when Feyre is dying and all of the High Lords like use their power to save her, that part just never made any sense to me, because why would they care? Like, I get that they saved, or that she saved them, but at the same time they all seemed very selfish, and I just thought it didn't make much sense that all of them were on board with it. I don't know, like I said, I need to go back and reread that book, but I just remember feeling like it didn't make any sense. Anyways, go ahead and leave comments down below if you disagree with me. I would love to hear other people's perspective on that, because maybe I just didn't get something. So, learning about Feyre's powers and all like the different things that she could do was very fun. I just feel like the second book had like such good vibes, and it was just so sweet watching Feyre fall in love with Rhysand, and especially at the end, like knowing that he felt that way about her the whole time. I just love that one. And the twist at the end of that one was very unexpected. I never would have seen that coming, and I'm usually fairly good at calling twists before they happen, especially with mystery books, but obviously these are different. So yeah, like I said, if you haven't read these, I'm trying not to totally give away everything, but I've obviously given away quite a bit. But even if you haven't read them and you're still watching my spoilers, they're still worth the read for sure, because I'm leaving out a lot of information. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to book 3. This one was kind of a little bit difficult for me to read just because it's very war-centered. The whole war between the king and like their court happens in this book. So there's a lot of politics in that book. There's a lot of them dealing with the other lords and dealing with Tamlin because he's supposed to be on their side even though he hates them. That's just a whole thing in and of itself. And then in this book a couple times too, they try to like shove Elaine and Lucien together, because it's in this one that they're kind of dealing with the fact that they're each other's mates, and she just like wants absolutely nothing to do with him, and it just kind of felt like he was like just pointlessly there in this book. I don't know, I don't really understand where she's going with Lucien's character. I also did like too that we start to learn a little bit more about Nesta and Elaine in this book. Obviously Elaine was not herself for a good chunk of this book. It was very cool to watch them kind of like become part of Feyre's new family, and it's so sweet how accepting like Rhysand's whole group is to everybody. I just find that very sweet. This book, I like panicked a little bit when I ordered it because it was so small. I was like, did I order the right book? But it kind of makes sense why it's so small, because it feels like it's just an in-between book between number 3 and number 5. So this one is interesting because you go into everybody's mind, like you get to be Mor for a chapter, you get to be Cassian for a chapter, you get to be Nesta for a little while, you get to be Rhysand. And a good chunk of this book is them like just trying to figure out what to get each other for the solstice holiday that they celebrate. Which is fine, but there were parts in that one that I was just kind of like, okay, yeah. So I wouldn't say that one's up there in my favorites for this group. That one's probably my like second least favorite. This book too is nice because this is where we kind of see Feyre get back into painting, and she finds a place to paint in this one. She finds kind of a little painting community, so this one is really nice because you're just kind of watching everybody heal after everything that happened in the war. So definitely a good book, but I get why it's so short. I definitely read number 5 the slowest out of all of the books, and it's not because of how big it is. It's actually because after reading book number 4 and she started introducing us being in other people's perspectives, I got worried that she was going to kill off Feyre. So I did not read that one nearly as fast as I read the other ones because I don't want Feyre to get killed off. So I was worried about that, but she's fine, don't worry. I definitely didn't like in this book how Nesta and Cassian played so many games with each other and they wouldn't just say what they were feeling. Like, I understand that to an extent, but the playing games aspect of it drives me crazy. I hate reading about that kind of stuff. I just was like so irritated, like the first half of this book. But I do understand that she's obviously being self-destructive because she's extremely depressed. I understand it, but I was just very annoyed with both of them. I wrote again that I was upset that there was never any resolution between Elaine and Nesta. It was just kind of like glossed over at the end, and they just kind of like haphazardly made up by holding hands. I don't know. At some point there needs to be a real conversation between them. That would be great. And as I said, I do hope we get an Elaine book because she is my favorite, and I think a book about her could be very interesting, but I don't know if it's going to continue as being about Nesta and Cassian, so I guess we will have to find out. The last thing I have written down for this is also what the F is going on with Tamlin, because they keep bringing him up, and we know that he's obviously gone downhill. He's completely let his court fall apart, and I just don't understand where we're going with that. So I just find that whole situation very confusing. Like, yeah, I don't know what's happening there. And then I said, why is it even a plot line for Lucien to be Elaine's mate, which I kind of already mentioned. It feels totally insignificant, and it does, because it just feels like, yeah, like I said, I think maybe the reason she did that is to like maybe eventually show that you don't have to end up with your mate, unless there's a possibility that you could have more than one. I'm not really sure. So I am interested to see what she does with that. I think for now that was everything. If you guys did read these books and you have any comments or anything to add, please comment down below. I would love to hear about what other people thought of these books, because I loved them, even though I had a lot of negative things to say. But that's just me being nitpicky, because I tend to do that with my favorite books. I like to think about like how I would have done it differently. I don't know why. So I wanted this to be a genuine book review, not just me sitting here saying how much I love these books, because I did. I absolutely love them. I'm gonna pre-order the next one. But yeah, there are definitely things I would have done differently, even though I did love them. So yeah, leave comments down below. Let me know what you guys think. If you haven't read these books, but you actually stuck around to the end of the video and you let me spoil everything for you, I think you should still read them, because I left out huge parts of the story. I didn't even talk about their dad or like any of that kind of stuff. So they are definitely still worth a read for sure, especially if this is your usual kind of genre. Last thing I'm gonna do before I hop off is I'm gonna rank them in order from my least favorite to my favorite. So least favorite goes like this. And then it would be this one next, second least favorite. Then probably this one next. That one's number 2. And this one's number 1. So favorite to least favorite. Right, if you did make it to the end of the video, thank you so much for tuning in. I would love to make more videos like this, so if you guys did enjoy it, please give me a thumbs up. That would help me out a lot, and I hope to see you guys in the next one.